Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk. I am Shekhar Gupta in Davos, and my guest today, the one Indian economic leader that the whole world looks up to, Raghuram Rajan, RBI Governor. Welcome to Walk the Talk, and thank you very much for choosing the coldest morning of this WEF.
Yes, it is very cold.
Very, very cold. I think when the sun comes out here a little bit, it gets really cold.
That's right.
And the mood's also a little bit chill this time. I mean, I know it's an old metaphor for Davos, but it is.
Well, the markets have been very volatile, and of course today they seem to be picking back up. But I think what we have really is a world economy where central banks have pumped up market prices quite a bit. And I don't think markets really know what the true level of fundamentals is. So they're trying to find a level. And every time some news comes up which can possibly cause economic worries, there are jitters, there's volatility. Today it is what's happening in China, whether China is going to depreciate, what's happening with the oil price, whether the oil funds are going to withdraw their money from markets. Tomorrow it could be something else. I think until we have more stability, partly as monetary policy becomes more normal, I think we may have this volatility.
So because we don't know how we got to the top,
Yes.
that we are afraid of being there.
No, we pumped ourselves up to the top, I would say. It's not
Markets don't know. I mean, that's what you are saying.
exactly.
The markets
Don't know what the right level is. The hope amongst a lot of policymakers is you've pumped stock prices up. Now we elevate economic activity so they match the level of stock prices. But that's a big hope, whether we can actually do that. So economic activity hasn't kept pace, and of course there are concerns about China slowing right now, other emerging markets slowing. Brazil is now in deep recession. So these are issues that the market is worried about.
So would you say, is this like something like psychologists would call acrophobia?
Yes, it is a kind
Fear
of
of the
acrophobia.
heights.
It is absolutely a kind of acrophobia because everybody is saying, look, things are a little peaky. Is this the time everybody else is going to take their money off the table? And if they're going to take the money off the table, let me be first out of the door.
Right.
So it's the everybody's guessing what everybody else is doing. What I call jitters about jitters.
Right.
And until you have more of confidence in the real economy, I think this is bound to happen. Part of the problem is the way we've tried to get these economies out of trouble by keeping interest rates really low and all these quantitative easing methods. And they have some benefits, but they have a lot of costs also.
So that's what you've been saying for quite some time. In fact, you've been warning of this for a long time.
Yes.
So to an extent, it's vindication.
Well,
intellectually.
Vindication, look, it doesn't require a lot of intellect to make this point. But yes, my wife keeps calling me Cassie, short for Cassandra. So she does worry that I've got into this routine.
I thought that was the real Rubini.
Well, so I'm not a doom and gloom guy.
Right.
I like to see the upside. I think, for example, India is in the process of recovery. There is a fair amount of upside. But yeah, you have to worry about the limits of certain kinds of policies. And I think we central bankers have gotten away a long time by undertaking policies which short-run beneficial, long-run detrimental. And we need to examine ourselves to see, are we doing the right thing?
So have the central bankers done lazy banking or lazy regulation or
It's not so much lazy banking.
or steroid medication?
No. I think what they've done is stepped up to the plate, perhaps where nobody else was stepping up.
Right.
But also taken on responsibilities that they have no possibility of delivering in the long run. You have to say monetary policy can do only so much, and the rest has to be left to other people to do. If you try and take too much on monetary policy, you essentially violate your own mandate, which is you have to create the conditions for stable, sustainable growth.
Yeah, you try and do something that you are neither mandated to do nor capable of doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I think this message has to get out loud and clear. everybody thinks there's an easy win. I mean, even in India, we have constantly pressures for
Cut
lower
rates,
interest
cut
rates.
yes.
But lower rates are only part of the solution and sometimes the wrong solution.
Right.
A lot of the time, it is about creating the environment for sustainable investment, which means convincing people that tax laws are appropriate, that government action will come speedily and on time, that there will be consumer demand. All these are things that sometimes are only peripheral to monetary policy.
So I heard your lecture with Dr. Kurian's portrait in the background.
Absolutely.
Strong lecture on exactly this, and I think the point that you made, which gets me in the guts as a non-economist, taxpayer, and borrower, is that an individual can today borrow at a much lower rate, 300 basis points lower than a corporation or somebody producing power.
Yes.
So how did we get ourselves into that jam?
You're absolutely right. That's a point that needs to be made, that there are two components to interest rates. One is the risk-free policy rate that we set,
Right.
and the other is the risk premium that people demand to lend. And if somebody says they're borrowing at 13 and 14% from their bank, today with the policy rate at 6.75, that means that there is about 6.5 percentage points of risk premium that people are asking from these people to lend. And that comes when the banks distrust you. When the policy that you follow is in good times, you take the upside, you take all the equity. But in bad times, you go to the bank and say, how much are you going to cut your
haircut?
What haircut are you going to
take? Which
take?
I now call Mundan.
Mundan, exactly.
It's
the
Mundan. It's a tonsuring, yes.
And you go to them and you say, look, I know I have to pay you. Sometimes I even know that you have pledges against my assets.
Right.
But try me in court and I'll see you 10 years later.
Right.
And so why don't you take a one-time settlement of...
And meanwhile, if you go after me, other stuff will leak. Maybe CBI will go after you as well.
Well, I'm not sure about that side of the thread. But what I'm saying is the system has been geared towards favoring those who have the ability to work the courts, etc.
Right.
Well, we've also made some laws fairly stringent, such as SURFACE.
Yes.
So that with the small guy, the small businessman...
I see these full-page ads in newspapers, people whose properties are being auctioned, and they're usually small shopkeepers or small house builders.
Exactly. So we have a very powerful system against them, and sometimes there's bank inefficiency in the process, etc. And I get letters every so often from these small businessmen saying my property was seized, but the value of the property was significantly more than the loan I had taken, etc. Right. So they're heart-rending letters. At the same time, these laws are so stringent because we're trying to get back from
I know cases of suicides in mining industry because mining shut down.
Yeah.
So small town contractors who had just borrowed to buy 2 JCBs and now can't repay and being repossessed and exposed to shame.
No. So this is the problem with debt, right?
Yes.
In order for you to get low interest rates, the lender has to be able to repossess effectively.
Right.
So I don't think the answer is softening the debt contract, but making it work effectively for the large people.
For the big guy.
Now, for the small guy, we need to find ways of dealing with these problems that don't shut down businesses automatically.
Right.
That perhaps we can work out with the entrepreneur who has some prospects and without killing the business. That is something we need to think about. But broadly, I think the clamor for lower interest rates should also be how can we fix our own house to make sure that large entrepreneurs repay on time when they get into trouble.
This leakage of credit.
Exactly. And I think this is something that we've been trying to work on.
Are you going to do more on this?
Well, of course, the government has come up with this bankruptcy code, which I think will make a big difference.
Right.
Because in many other countries, it's the threat of taking the borrower to bankruptcy, which is what causes him to deal with the bank outside.
It has to pass through our parliament.
It certainly has, and there is some way to go. Also, the judicial system has to set up the right sort of tribunals and so on. But I think that will make a big difference. I think we ourselves at the Reserve Bank have been creating processes for the banks to try and recover their money. Now what we're doing is pushing them to be more firm in their dealings with the borrowers and in cleaning up the balance sheets, with the idea that the idea is not to shut down firms, but to put them back on track, to put the projects into an earning mode so that they can repay the banks, so that the ultimate owner of the banks, the taxpayer, gets his money back.
So Raghu, just as the Americans used to say in 2008 during the crisis, too big to fail.
Yes.
We have borrowers who are too big to repossess.
Well, we're trying to change that. We're trying to change that.
Must change.
Absolutely, and I think the what we do. Look, let me emphasize that this is not about big business. This is not about successful businessmen, businesswomen, rich people. This is not a Robin Hood issue.
Right.
This is an issue about the wrongdoers amongst that community who, as you said earlier, raised the cost of borrowing for everybody.
Right.
This is saying if we can get those guys to behave.
And frankly, who seem to be suffering no pain.
Exactly.
It plays very poorly in public opinion also.
Absolutely. If you flaunt your yacht or you flaunt your massive birthday bashes, etc.,
Right.
even while owing the system a lot of money,
Right.
it does seem
Or
to
your cricket team.
it does seem to suggest to the public that
You don't care.
I don't care.
Huh.
And I think that is the wrong message to send at this time.
And I own the system.
If you are in trouble, you should show that you care by cutting down your expenses and not flaunting more spending in public.
In fact, it's so interesting that you say this, because even the theme at Davos this year is so much about equity, so much about fairer wages. The speech that Joe Biden delivered here could have been delivered by Indira Gandhi in old times with some changes.
Absolutely.
So this militates against that mood which is global now. It's not just in India.
Right. No, I think we have to celebrate entrepreneurship.
Right.
We have to encourage much more of the kinds of businesses we are seeing emerging in India. I think Startup India is a great program.
Right.
But we also need to ensure that the established businesses do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
We need them. We absolutely. I'm sorry. This is a very cold day.
You are a Chicago wala.
Well, this is cold for Chicago also.
You are better equipped than me.
In Chicago, they say it's never cold. You're just underdressed. But anyway, the point I think
In
is
Davos, you can never be dressed enough in January.
yes, if we can get the big businesses to do what they're supposed to do, and many of them are.
Right.
But the guys who are not behaving, if they can behave, I think they, coupled with all the young entrepreneurs who are coming on stream, we have a world-class system.
So if you can fix some of this is the key to reducing real interest rates, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think if you can reduce the premium, the risk-free rate will come down as inflation comes down.
Right.
That is our endeavor.
Right.
I've always said the point is not to hold back business, but to create a sustainable environment where, with inflation low,
Right.
the saver, the person who keeps writing to me every day, "Apne interest rate kyun kaata hai? Why have you brought it down 200 basis points,
Right.
125 basis
Right.
points?" And I tell them, you're actually better off today than you were earlier.
Right.
Earlier, you used to get 9% interest rate,
Right.
but inflation was 11%. So your principal
Right.
was actually reducing in value. You
Right.
got the income,
Huh.
but your principal was deteriorating in value by
Losing
11%
value,
every
yes,
year.
yes.
You didn't notice that.
Right.
Today you get 7% as interest rate,
Right.
but inflation is 5.5.
Right.
So your principal is not eroding.
Right.
You're actually getting interest rate over and above the
Or
rate
you
of
have to be
inflation.
built like this one. So you don't have to.
That's nice.
Yeah.
He's got socks
He's
on.
got socks, yes. Even he needs socks on buttons, whatever he might call
He's
it.
got shoes.
He's got shoes. Hi. So even if you need shoes, it's really cold. So, Raghu, what's your, we know your diagnosis now for the world and for India. What's your treatment for the world and for India?
Well, the treatment for the world, I think, is central banks have to say, okay, we've done enough. Let's now let things normalize. And I think this is important because as central banks do more, they're putting pressure on other central banks to join them.
Right.
You've seen the Chinese
Right.
basically talk about, at least send the signal they may be depreciating the renminbi. I think part of the reason for that is they see the euro depreciating against the dollar, they see the yen depreciating against the dollar, and they say, why not us? And as you know, I've been making this statement again and again. We're not into the business of depreciating the rupee.
Right.
But we do feel the pain when the euro depreciates against us.
Right, absolutely.
Or the yen depreciates because our exports are less.
Yes.
less. So we need a more predictable world where exchange rates are not the method by which we generate
And you don't
growth.
lose your sleep over how much did the rupee open at this morning.
Not just now, because I think we're in a fairly good position. And we have fairly good people monitoring all the time. Of course, I do look at it, but I don't lose sleep over it.
You think this thing in India, this fixation with the value of the rupee is overdone, it's old-fashioned?
Well, first,
Somehow our national self-worth is linked to the value of the rupee.
we keep looking at the value of the rupee against the dollar. That's the wrong thing, because the dollar is the strongest currency in the world now and has been appreciating quite a bit. When we look at the rupee, people keep saying all-time low against the dollar. If you look at the rupee over the last couple of years in real effective terms, which means adjusting for our inflation relative to the rest of the world, we're absolutely flat.
Yes.
We're absolutely.
In fact, I saw today Credit Suisse study which shows that rupee actually has depreciated least of all compared to all the other.
We've been one of the stronger emerging market currencies, but we've been absolutely flat. Now, I think that's important. We shouldn't be too strong or too weak.
Too weak, yes.
So, just enough, nice trend, just enough to make sure that we are competitive.
Right.
But we don't have the free fall depreciation that the ruble, the Brazilian real have had, which generates huge amount of inflation and creates problems down the line.
Now for India, globally,
I would
central
say
bankers should be as disciplined as you and should be as willing to say no as you.
And countries have to do more structural reforms.
Right.
So that is clear. From India's perspective, I think we are broadly on the right path. I don't think India can do the kind of massive reforms we did in 1991, I mean, post-crisis. But what we can do is a lot of small reforms which build into big reforms, right? And I think before you know it, you have transformed the country. So, for example, take the financial sector where we now have 2 new banks, but 21 new banks coming in the next year.
Yes.
That's going to transform the landscape.
In fact, I featured this Bandhan Bank founder on Walk the Talk. I went to his village in Tripura.
Yes.
What a brilliant story that is.
Absolutely. He's such a dedicated man.
I think that's a real tribute to Indian capitalism.
He is. And, I mean, he's also saying we have to charge the right price.
Right.
He says, look, I can't make it work below, I used to have to charge 23, 24%.
Right.
Now, because you've allowed me to take deposits, I can bring it down into the teens.
Right.
And then I'll keep working to bring it lower and lower.
Right.
So, I mean, he's about giving people loans, easy access at the right price.
Right.
And I think we have to do this across the board.
And
Bring
you
more
need more
people
of
into
that.
the system, charge them the price. They're willing to pay, but give them the service. And he's doing that.
So, Raghu, 2 things. One, how do you fix India's banks? Because banks are under stress, particularly government banks. And number 2, how do you transmit real benefit of falling commodity prices, particularly oil prices, to consumers and the economy?
Yeah.
How do you use this to change the mood?
Well, I think on the banks, we are in the process of cleaning them up. We spent quite some time giving the powers to take actions.
Right.
Now they have those powers. They have a lot of flexibility in dealing with the loan. We're telling them, put the asset back on track. But to put the asset back on track, you might in some time, you might have to put new management. You might have to write down the debt a little bit so as to give the space to grow for the entity, which means you have to recognize it as a non-performing asset. don't put band-aids. We've
Right,
done enough
right,
band-aids
right.
for a long time.
Yes.
We've had this process of extend and pretend.
Or don't spray anesthetic.
Exactly.
Right.
You need to take the
Pain.
real pain now,
Right.
but it will create enormous gain down the line.
Right.
When the balance sheets are clean, you can fund growth. And I think a number of bankers now see this, that, okay, we're all going to clean up our balance sheets and we're going to move forward. So this is a process that I hope over the next few quarters.
Are they listening?
Oh, of course.
They are listening.
And, fortunately, we're the regulators, so
No,
they
no.
do have
I
to
mean,
listen.
They always say, yes, yes, I will do it.
No. There is a close cooperation between the banks, the RBI, and the government.
And I
in this
believe,
process.
because I live in Delhi and my vantage point is a different one, that the old phenomenon of phone calls, be kind to this one, so and so is my person, is under suspended animation.
Well, my sense is it wasn't for want of trying.
Right.
But I think the government has clearly sent the signal
Right.
that it wants to clean up the banks.
Right.
It is part of this process. It is ready with as much capital as needed. And I think this gives us a chance to actually deal with the problem, put it behind us so it doesn't fester and See, the problem with banking stress situations is the longer you ignore it, the longer you stick your head in
The worse
the
it gets.
sand,
The worse
it gets
it gets.
bigger.
Right.
And to eventually fill the hole requires far more resources. Today, we have the resources. The government has pledged what is needed. We will also help. But I think the point is that we can manage this.
Right.
If we wait much longer, the world is not going to get much better. I mean, look at some of the industries that are suffering. It will take a long time for steel overcapacity to
Right,
come down.
right.
So I don't think we sort of wait and hope and pray that somehow magic happens, world demand increases tremendously in the short run. So we deal with the problem as we find it, but I think we can do it, cauterize, clean up, move forward.
So, first half of Nouriel Roubini's statement here, I don't know if you attended the India session.
No, I didn't, unfortunately.
He said, I mean, when Nouriel Roubini says India is in a sweet spot,
Yes.
you would look up.
Yes.
So, the idea of the sweet spot is India is such a big net commodities importer,
Yes.
and prices have fallen.
Yes.
So, are we making sufficient use of it, or how do we make the best use of it?
I think we making appropriate use. Of course, people say oil prices have fallen so much. Hasn't this helped hugely in inflation? It's helped some, but remember, government also has taken some in
Yes,
excise.
quite a lot. Yes.
And I think that's a reasonable approach because you don't want people to suddenly start over-consuming
Yes.
in the short
And then
run.
the prices start
then-
going up,
Exactly.
yes.
So you need to be a little careful on that. And I think passing on some but not all is the appropriate
Sensible thing.
But I think this has helped our corporations tremendously. So yesterday a tire manufacturer was complaining to me all these cheap imports from China. And I said, what's your bottom line? And he said, it's been the best ever. I said, how can you talk about cheap imports that you can't compete with
Yes.
and you have a bottom line? Well,
Right.
truth is, top line is not growing because prices,
Right.
they can't pass through.
Right.
But the costs have come down
Yes.
tremendously.
So you reduce prices maybe and
Exactly,
get your top line up.
exactly.
Yes. So do
Exactly.
the usual thing.
So I think the point is that yes, there is pain in some parts of industry, but broadly profitability is reasonable. And if we have a good monsoon, remember we had 2 droughts. And
Consecutive, only for the third time in 110 years.
exactly. And if you had these kinds of droughts, the level at which they were would have knocked us out
Oh, yes,
in the
absolutely.
past.
Yes.
But we did too with still moderate inflation,
Right.
deficit under control, rupee under
And
control.
still moderate fall in agricultural production.
Exactly, very
Very small,
moderate.
very moderate.
And for that, the resilience of the farmer, I think we also have to look to the allied activities,
Right.
which have increased tremendously.
Poultry,
Horticulture,
milk,
poultry.
yes.
So, broadly speaking, I think if we have a good monsoon, if the world economy picks up a little bit, I think we could grow much faster because as you know, capacity utilization is still quite low in India.
Yeah.
We can ramp up production.
Yes. In fact, so second part of what Roubini said, which was his sort of qualification, he said, but India has to address its capital deficit. And he said India has all kinds of capital deficit, from financial to physical infrastructure to intellectual to skills to regulatory.
Yes. No, I think that's a reasonable assessment. I sort of put four heads, actually five. Infrastructure, of course, we're working on it. Brand new projects, let's implement them.
Right.
Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, we've planned for a long time. Now let's build it out. Amravati,
Right.
Mr. Chandrababu Naidu is
Yes.
gung-ho about it. Let's see it
I
done.
think it's wonderful to see an Indian chief minister actually set up an office.
Absolutely.
And in fact, that's where I'm planning to go now to eat some idlis.
He's been meeting everybody.
Wonderful.
He's full of energy.
Yes.
I think it's quite remarkable.
Quite remarkable.
And he's open to ideas.
And some of his interventions also
Absolutely.
In sessions, I must say,
Yeah.
are quite...
No. Yesterday I was at a session where he on infrastructure, where he essentially said, "Come, we're willing
Yes.
to do anything that's sensible. Just
Right.
come to me with the ideas. I want one idea from you every 6 months." He told the assembly.
Right.
So look, I think that's one of the high points of India. The competition between states.
States, yes.
Every state has an investment meeting. Even if 10% of those promises come through, the fact that the chief ministers are out beating the ground to try and get
Right.
more investment is a great development. But I think Nuriel, infrastructure makes sense. Human capital, there we need to really up our game. So if we can build out the skills as the government is planning, if the private sector can contribute, hundreds of thousands being trained by the private sector also, that'll be a big step forward. Regulation. I think I thought this was extraordinary. If we can allow the startups 3 years without inspectors,
Right.
if the inspectorate can be kept away,
Right.
what a fantastic
What a
change
fantastic-
that will
yes,
make.
Yes.
Of course, we need to inspect eventually.
Right.
But let them at least grow.
Right.
How much damage can they do?
I know, let them make some mistakes.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so that's three. Financial sector, we're making big reforms. Last big area is agriculture.
Right.
We absolutely need to invest in agriculture, create the system that the farmer can feel safe. I think this insurance program in agriculture, if we roll it out properly,
Right.
will be a tremendous
And Ashok
benefit.
Gulati tells me it's a good program. In fact, he tells me
Well,
it's the first big change.
Absolutely. I think a lot of ideas have gone into it.
Right.
A lot of technology can be used. And it uses the private sector also, enlists the private sector in this
Right.
process. If we can roll it out properly, it can be a game changer, because ultimately it'll also move us away from the stable wheat and rice, which we have too much of,
Right.
to the other stuff which needs production but is much more volatile for the farmer and doesn't have a support process.
And if we do all this, what kind of conversation will we be having at this time next year?
Well, next year may be a little too early.
Yeah.
I hope what we can say next year is, look, we're on our way. We've added another percentage point of growth. And we're looking to, strong growth for the next 10, 15 years. I think, this reminds me a lot of 2001, 2002, this period. When, remember, we kept
Right.
doing reforms
Right.
and nothing seemed to happen.
Yes,
The
and then
needle was
suddenly,
not
yes,
moving.
it picked up, yes.
And then we had 10 years of strong growth.
Right.
I hope this is like that we're doing all the things, cleaning up, dealing with legacy problems, and then we have a long period of sustainable growth.
And if I can then ask you, finally, the trick question, where will Dr. Rajan be next year?
Hopefully not in this cold.
Inshallah. but
Inshallah.
I mean, my question is, if India does want you to stay on, will you stay on?
That when that question is posed to me, I will answer it by the authorities. But look, we are in a good position.
Yeah.
But we need to continue working on it.
But I think, where all our votes are. So look forward to continue
Thank you very much.
getting wisdom from you and look forward to your continuing leadership.